poor rancher offered water to his Apache foes, and that day, the war changed forever. The morning sun crept slowly over the dusty plains, spilling gold across the dry earth and tinting the distant hills in soft amber. A faint wind whispered through the sparse sagebrush, carrying with it the scent of worn leather, parched grass, and a river that ran sluggish and silver beneath the light. Jesse Rowland moved along the riverbank with the careful patience of a man who had learned to read the land like a weathered book. Each step pressed lightly into the dust, leaving impressions that would vanish with the next wind, much like the memories he carried from a war that had hollowed him more than any gunshot ever could. At 36, his shoulders were broad but relaxed, his hands calloused, and his eyes steady, eyes that had seen both cruelty and grace, and now sought the quiet dignity of everyday survival. In the distance, the faint shimmer of movement caught his attention. Shadows among the rocks, the flutter of cloth against the dry reeds. He slowed, sensing instinctively that the land was not empty of witnesses. And then he saw her, Yolotli, moving with the measured grace of someone who had learned to navigate both the earth and its dangers. She was slender but strong, her black hair braided and adorned with small feathers that caught the sunlight like glimmers of memory. Her dress was simple, fringed, and worn, yet carried a dignity no cloth could imitate. At 28, she carried herself with a quiet authority of someone used to command and yet burdened with a loneliness that spoke to lands traversed alone, far from the warmth of family and tribe. For a long moment, their eyes met across the riverbank. Jesse's instinct was to reach for his gun, though he knew in the marrow of his bones that this would accomplish nothing. Yolotli's gaze, calm and unyielding, seemed to measure him not as enemy or ally, but as a man who might see beyond fear and suspicion. Between them, the air was taut with unspoken questions. Who are you? What do you seek? And why does the world feel so heavy that even the light of morning cannot ease it? The tension stretched like a taut rope until the faint sound of dry footsteps reminded Jesse of the men who trailed behind him. Ranch hands, loyal yet quick to distrust, squinted at the distant figure, whispering words too soft for Yolotli to hear. They murmured of threat, of danger, of the Apache who had been the undoing of so many lives. Jesse lifted a hand, calm and firm, signaling patience, and the murmurs stilled. He did not want fear to shape the moment, not here, not now. Yolotli's steps faltered. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked from the sun, and the long march since dawn had left her weary. Yet she did not run, she did not flee. There was pride in her endurance, a memory of the tribe that had raised her, and a defiance born of survival. Jesse noticed, and his heart, long trained to suppress empathy, stirred anyway. Water was near. It was a simple truth, but one that could determine much in the next moments. He approached slowly, keeping his hands visible and empty. The wind carried his voice low and careful, though the words were meant as much for himself as for her. "There's water here," he said, his tone gentle. No insistence, no command, only an offering. Yolotli's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in the instinctive calculation of trust. She had learned over years that kindness often carried hidden edges. Yet there was something in the steady cadence of his steps, the way he moved without threat, that unsettled her suspicion. She took one step closer to the river, then another, measuring the space between caution and relief. The river glimmered beneath her gaze, its surface fractured into tiny prisms that reflected the rising sun. She knelt at the edge, letting the cool water touch her hands and lips. Jesse stood a pace behind, silent, watching, respecting her need for space. The moment was quiet, almost fragile, yet charged with a recognition neither of them fully understood. Around them, the land seemed to pause. The wind softened, the distant caw of a raven echoed against the canyon walls, and even the dust seemed to settle as if acknowledging the delicate truce being woven by small acts. Jesse's ranch hands remained at a careful distance, restless but obedient, understanding that some lessons could not be forced. It was in that silence that Yolotli allowed herself the first breath of relief since the early hours of the morning. And in that same pause, Jesse's gaze softened. He had seen enough suffering to recognize it in her eyes, the quiet ache of being separated from one's own, the weariness that comes from walking alone through lands that neither give nor ask for mercy. A rustle among the nearby bushes made both of them turn. Two figures appeared at the edge of the clearing, distant relatives, scouts from her tribe, cautious and watchful. Their presence complicated the moment, yet it did not undo the fragile understanding that had begun between Jessie and Yolotli. She rose slowly, brushing dust from her dress, and nodded at him, a silent acknowledgement of the trust being formed. Jessie inclined his head in return. There was no need for words. The river, the sun, the air between them had said enough. He knew that this meeting was the first note in a longer melody, one that would carry them through danger, uncertainty, and the slow unfolding of something more than mere survival. As Yolotli retreated into the shadowed path that would eventually lead her back to her people, Jessie remained by the water's edge. His eyes followed her figure until it disappeared among the rocks. The wind shifted, lifting the dust into small golden spirals, and for the first time in many years, he felt a pulse of hope that was not tied to profit or land or survival, but to the quiet truth of human connection. Behind him, his ranch hands whispered again, unsure of what they had witnessed. Jessie did not answer. Some lessons, he knew, were learned not through instruction, but through observation, patience, and the gentle courage to act with heart instead of fear. The plains stretched wide and empty before him, yet they seemed smaller now, narrowed by the possibilities of kindness, by the fragile trust that had taken root in the span of a single morning. And though the path ahead was uncertain, though the winds of conflict still whispered across the land, Jessie Rowland felt, for the first time in many years, that the world might yet bend toward mercy, if only one soul chose to reach across the divide. And so the day continued, the sun climbing higher, dust rising and settling, and the river flowing as it always had. Yet between Jessie Rowland and the Apache girl named Yolotli, a quiet bond had been struck, fragile, invisible, yet unbroken. And somewhere in that unspoken connection lay the promise of journeys yet to come, of trials that would test hearts, and of a story that was only just beginning to unfold as Yolotli stepped away from the riverbank and began navigating the rocky path. Jessie Rowland felt an unspoken weight settle on his shoulders, a responsibility heavier than any gun or hardship he had ever borne. Though danger might have lurked unseen in the stretches of the plains, he knew that he would guide her safely, no matter the cost. Her tribe's distant scouts trailed at the edges of the land, cautious yet watchful. But for now, the space between them allowed a quiet companionship to grow, one measured in careful steps, glances, and the subtle rhythm of two hearts learning to trust. The earth beneath their feet was dry and unyielding, yet with each careful stride, a fragile bond began to take shape, growing steadily in the spaces between words and gestures. By evening, they reached a small clearing where the faint warmth of the sun lingered in the shadows. Around a modest campfire, the flames danced against the encroaching twilight, casting long, flickering shadows across the dust and rock. They shared a sparse meal in near silence, speaking only enough to sustain the journey, yet in those few words lay layers of understanding. Jessie's voice broke the quiet first, low and deliberate, carrying the weight of honesty. "You are stronger than you realize," he said, and in that statement there was not only acknowledgment of her endurance, but also a recognition of the courage that had carried her alone across these lands. Yolotli's response was quiet, a slight nod that spoke volumes. Her eyes reflected gratitude, acknowledgment, and the faint stirrings of trust. Around them, the plains remained vast and indifferent, yet within that small circle of light and shadow, a new sense of order and connection had quietly emerged. The next day, they crossed the open plains, hills and valleys bathed in sunlight, rivers murmuring softly along their edges. Every shift in the landscape mirrored the slow growth of their understanding. The curves of the hills, the glint of sunlight on stone, the sweep of wind through dry grass, all seemed to echo the unspoken dialogue between them. Yolotli spoke of her childhood within the tribe, sharing memories of elders' teachings, moments of joy and fear, and the unyielding spirit that had shaped her. Jessie, in return, revealed fragments of his own life, memories of the war that had carved scars into his body and soul, of loss and solitude, and of the land that had given him both sustenance and solace. They listened to one another, not merely hearing, but absorbing the essence of each other's truths, recognizing the resilience, sorrow, and courage hidden beneath the exterior of each. That evening, camping at the edge of a small wooded area, Yolotli's voice broke the quiet once again, soft and measured. "Do you truly intend to protect me, not because it is expected, but because you will?" Jesse's answer was nearly a whisper, carried by the faint crackle of a fire. "It is no great act, only the acknowledgement of another person's worth." In that moment, the unspoken trust between them deepened. It was not yet love as the world commonly defines it, not a surge of passion or instant infatuation, but a quiet bloom of admiration and care, like water slowly soaking the dry earth. Every glance, every subtle gesture, every shared silence wove a tapestry that would support the emotional journey ahead. The following days brought more miles, more shifting landscapes, and the gentle reinforcement of their trust. They traveled along narrow trails beside cliffs, through fields of high grass swaying in the wind, and across shallow streams that caught the sunlight like scattered gold. Each obstacle, though minor, became a shared test of patience and cooperation. Yolotli's strength and precision, learned in the careful traditions of her tribe, complemented Jesse's quiet endurance and practical knowledge of the land. The plains, with their vast emptiness, seemed less daunting when crossed together, their presence a silent affirmation of courage, honor, and humanity. At last, the familiar outlines of her tribe's encampment appeared. The air shifted as tension, hope, and recognition mingled in the wind. Yolotli's distant relatives emerged from the scattered tents, their eyes wide with relief, their movements cautious, yet brimming with hope. The reunion was neither rushed nor loud. It was measured, dignified, and suffused with emotion. Fathers and brothers, aunts and cousins, all approached with quiet reverence, their gestures expressing relief, joy, and wonder. Yolotli herself knelt briefly before her father, the chief, honoring his authority and acknowledging the depth of the bond that connected her to her people. His hands lifted her face, eyes glistening with unshed tears, and in the warmth of that gaze, years of separation and fear were transformed into profound gratitude. Jesse remained at a respectful distance, his presence steady, calm, and unassuming. The chief's gaze shifted toward him, noting the integrity etched in the lines of his face, the sincerity in the way he had cared for Yolotli, and the unwavering patience he had exhibited. With a voice deep yet tender, the chief spoke, "He is a good man. He will honor and protect you." Then, in a deliberate ceremonial gesture, he blessed their union, signaling acceptance not only of Jesse as Yolotli's partner, but of the bond formed between cultures through patience, respect, and courage. Following this, the tribe gifted the couple a small, beautiful home on the outskirts of their lands, a modest dwelling, yet imbued with significance, a place where two lives could merge and flourish under the blessing of family and heritage alike. Entering their new home, Jesse and Yolotli finally grasped each other's hands fully. The gesture was neither tentative nor ceremonial. It was intimate, profound, and unbreakable. Sunlight poured through the windows, scattering across the wooden floor in warm, golden streaks. Every corner of the modest home seemed to radiate hope, a quiet promise of safety and belonging. Yolotli's voice, soft and sincere, broke the stillness. "I am safe here." Jesse's reply, equally gentle, "And I am too, because you are here," conveyed the depth of a connection forged not by circumstance, but by choice, respect, and shared vulnerability. Together they stepped outside as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, spilling light across the plains. The tall grass swayed in the evening breeze, dust drifted softly along the ground, and the river murmured its timeless song. In that moment, the world seemed to pause, bearing witness to a reconciliation of hearts, a bridge between worlds, and a testament to the power of human kindness. The day's journey, the cautious glances, the shared silences, and the deliberate care of small gestures had culminated in a triumph not of violence, but of understanding. That night, seated beside the fireplace in their new home, Yolotli reflected on the blessing of her father, the acceptance of her tribe, and the quiet courage of a man who had offered water when suspicion might have dictated withdrawal. Jesse held her hand, his grip steady and comforting, and said, "Life's greatest joys are those we share with others." Yolotli's quiet nod acknowledged the unspoken truth that trust, patience, and simple acts of care could indeed shape destinies. The gesture that had begun so simply, offering water on a scorching morning, had blossomed into a journey that had altered the course of multiple lives. Jesse and Yolotli had found not only each other, but a bridge between worlds, a testament to the transformative power of compassion and respect. The vast plains stretched around them, eternal and unchanging, yet now infused with the story of two souls who dared to reach across fear and division with courage and empathy. Their home glowed softly in the final light of dusk, a small beacon of hope, warmth, and new beginnings. Outside, the landscape held the memory of struggle, yet promised a future built on trust and understanding. They gazed into each other's eyes, silently vowing to face joys and trials together, to nurture the bond that had grown through shared patience and courage. The quiet strength between them was more enduring than any fortification of stone. It was a living testament to the human spirit's capacity for grace, for forgiveness, and for love that blooms slowly, deliberately, and with meaning. As darkness settled over the plains, the home remained illuminated, soft light spilling from windows onto the dusted ground, marking a new chapter. Jesse and Yolotli stood hand in hand, listening to the wind and the murmuring river, aware that the world around them could remain vast and indifferent. Yet inside the small dwelling, kindness, love, and understanding had created a sanctuary. The narrative of their lives, once fractured by war, fear, and separation, now flowed in harmony with the rhythms of the earth, the sun, and the enduring human heart. In that quiet twilight, the lesson became clear. Small acts of compassion can echo far beyond the moment. Courage rooted in empathy can shift the course of lives, and love, patient and enduring, can heal the deepest wounds while bridging divides once thought insurmountable. Jesse and Yolotli, standing side by side, reflected that truth in every breath, in every heartbeat, and in every glance shared across the warm glow of their home. The sun finally disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving the plains in the soft hush of twilight. In their small home, lit by flickering firelight, Jesse and Yolotli remained together, a living embodiment of the transformation that begins with care, flourishes with understanding, and thrives in love. In the sweep of endless plains and the slow turning of the sky above, a single truth endured. Even in the harshest lands, even in the shadow of fear and war, mercy, kindness, and the human heart's willingness to see another as fully human can change the world. And so, the day that began with a simple offering of water had unfolded into a story of hope, trust, and connection, leaving an imprint not only on two lives, but on the land itself. Jesse and Yolotli had begun a life together, guided by courage, patience, and love that bloomed slowly, quietly, and profoundly. Their hands remained clasped, their hearts aligned, and in the warmth of their home, they understood at last that true strength lies not in power or conquest, but in the willingness to give, to trust, and to love. The plains around them whispered the memory of their journey. Every dusted path, every swaying grass blade, and every curve of the river spoke of perseverance, courage, and the transformative power of simple human acts. And for anyone listening, even from a distance, the story of Jesse, Rowland, and Yolotli offered a gentle truth. Kindness can bend fate, love can heal even the deepest scars, and peace begins in the quiet moments where hearts meet without fear, judgment, or haste. In the soft glow of twilight, with the river's murmur in the distance, and the plains stretching infinitely around them, Jesse and Yolotli stood together, hand in hand. The warmth of their home radiated into the night, carrying a story that would endure in memory, in spirit, and in the quiet understanding that the bravest acts are often those of compassion, empathy, and unwavering trust. And so, beneath the endless western sky, two souls found not only each other, but a world transformed, proving that even in the harshest lands, love, patience, and courage can prevail. If you loved this story, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more heartwarming Wild West tales.